Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Zoom or Facebook this evening, and instead of watching the football, which is restarting tonight. My name is Alan Friedman, Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association, and I'm your MC for this evening. Also visible on your screens are David Adler, President of the AJA, and Ted Lapkin, our Executive Director. Good evening to you as well. And also on your screen is our guest for tonight, Efraim Inbar. Shalom, Efraim.
Shalom to everybody from Jerusalem.
The format tonight will be much the same as before. David will be chatting with Efraim for about 30 minutes, after which we will open up the discussion with a live Q&A session from the audience. As usual, the chat function is available for general comments, so feel free to send messages to the audience during the discussion. For those who are not sure how to do this, clicking on the little chat icon in the middle of the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom screen will open up the chat window for you. Now, everybody should be muted to start with, and we'll keep you muted. And I'll please ask you to make sure that you don't accidentally unmute yourself, as one of the difficulties with the Zoom event is that it can be very distracting to the group when there are background noises if your microphone is on. Tonight's topic of Israel extending sovereignty to parts of Israel area.
We've got a couple of unmuted. Okay, we need Michael to mute.
Okay, that's better. So tonight's topic of Israel extending sovereignty to parts of Judea and Samaria is arguably the Israeli political subject of the moment. And with us tonight is one of the most renowned experts in this field. I would now like to ask David Adler to formally introduce Efraim and begin the discussion. Over to you, David.
Okay, we've got one or two more mutes to do. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this AJA event. I'm actually going to ask Professor Efraim Inbar to introduce himself. Efraim, can you just say a couple of words about the Jerusalem Institute of Strategic Studies, of which you're president, because some people might not be familiar with your organisation.
The Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security was established about 2 years ago, after I retired from Bar-Ilan University, where I directed the Begin Sadat Center for over 20 years. And the most important thing in any organization is, of course, the manpower, and we have probably the best team of conservative analysts in Israel. First of all, General Yaakov Amidror, former National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, his deputy, Eran Lerman, Dr. Eran Lerman, Colonel in Reserve, Eran Lerman. We have also experts in all Middle Eastern areas, expert on Turkey, which means in Israeli terms, somebody that speaks Turkish and understands what's happening there. Iran, the Arab world, Russia, the United States, which is, of course, very important to us. And what we are doing, we are producing basically papers, analysis. Now with under a Corona regime, we have less public functions, such as seminars and conferences. And I invite everybody to take a look at our website, jisorg.il, which is very active. And if you give me, your email, I'll put you on our email list, and you will be able to benefit from our regular analysis of what's going on in the region.
Okay, Efraim, thank you very much, and thank you again for joining us. So we'll get straight into the important subject that we want to discuss this evening. Can you give us a brief update on where things are in Israel in consideration of that element of the Trump peace plan, namely the extension of Israeli sovereignty into the Jordan Valley, parts of Judea and Samaria? How do things sit at the moment?
Well, it all depends on the Prime Minister, who announced that his intent after July 1st to extend the Israeli law to parts of Judea and Samaria. Initially, he mentioned and showed a map of the Jordan Valley, which is very important strategically. Now it seems that there are other suggestions on the table, like annexing Ma'ale Adumim next to Jerusalem and Gush Etzion, south of Jerusalem. We don't know exactly what is indeed his mind. Much also depends upon the United States position. After all, this is done within the framework of an American peace plan, and a map is being designed together with an American team, Israeli team and an American team. And those details, which are very important, have not been completed yet.
Okay. Now, I know that the Jerusalem Institute of Strategic Studies has made some recommendations to senior levels in the Israeli government. Just in essence, what are the recommendations that you've made?
Basically, Ran Lerman and myself wrote a paper which reached the highest echelons in Israel's government. It is also on our website in English, and we make the following recommendation. Basically, we recommend to the Israeli government to accept the Trump peace plan in its entirety, about the territorial aspects, which we would like to see incorporated, into Israel. The areas have to be annexed according to 3 criteria. One criteria that it is indeed of great strategic importance. A second criteria is that this territory doesn't burden Israel with a demographic problem, meaning that we don't want, a large number of Arabs to become, citizens of Israel. And the third criteria is that this area commands great Israeli consensus, and we defined it between 60 and 70%. And we also ran a poll, basically checking on ourselves who knew what the results are going to be. Those 3 criteria translate easily into territorial terms, which are the Jordan Valley, the areas around Jerusalem, like Ma'ale Adumim, Gush Etzion, and on those areas there is a consensus in Israel around 70%. I just want to mention that the support for annexing the Jordan Valley in Israel has always been higher than annexing the Golan Heights.
So when we see a noisy demonstration in Tel Aviv with some thousands of people on the street, how should we interpret that?
We have a very small minority in Israel, maybe 2-3%, that is basically willing to accept a Palestinian state in accordance to Palestinian demands.
Yeah, okay, so this is the hard left.
This is more or less what it is all about.
Okay. Is the new unity government actually united on this? If Bibi does decide to proceed on the 1st of July or soon thereafterwards, with the sort of framework that you're talking about, will he get the significant majority in the Knesset to support it?
Well, I think the issue is not the majority in the Knesset. The issue, he has a majority in the Knesset because there are members of Blue and White, and of course of Yamina, and even within Yesh Atid party, Knesset members that are willing to vote for annexing the Jordan Valley, for example. The issue is Gantz and Ashkenazi. And it seems that the Americans, and I'm not sure about it, but it seems that the Americans want a clear Israeli position on what they want. They say, okay, we are going to back you, but first we have to know what do you really want. We'll discuss it, and then we'll probably decide to back the Israeli government on the annexation issue. This is not clear yet. Gantz, before election, said that he's in favor of annexing the Jordan Valley, but he would like to see some kind of international agreement about it, which is, of course, not easy to get. Recently, in a discussion with settlers, they asked him, you know, some of the settlers are against the agreement, as you know, against the Trump plan because it includes the recognition of a Palestinian state. He said, listen, I heard from an old Mapainik that if you are given something, you take, and afterwards see what about the rest. So it seems that he's willing to go along with some kind of annexation if it's backed by the United States. Is Ashkenazi of the same position? I am not clear about it. You know, it much depends on the Jews, what the Jews are going to do.
You mentioned that he said at one stage that he'd like an international consensus of some sort. I mean, that's fantasy stuff, really. The chance of getting international consensus, particularly with the European Union, and we've seen the recent visit in the last couple of days of the German foreign minister. I mean, that's an extraordinary display that from the country that was responsible for the Holocaust to pressure Israel that there should be a state next to it that is Judenfrei and supporting a regime that pays people to kill Jews. It's just mind-boggling stuff. How much impact in Israel does the international pressure from Germany, Canada, EU, you know, the various other groups that have been shouting their objections?
Basically, Israelis are very realpolitik. You know, they understand the facts of life in international relations. So if it is done with American backing, I think that most Israelis are not that much worried about Europe, for example. You know, Europe doesn't have an army, or it's not a real strategic factor in world affairs. It can do some damage, maybe economically. This type of threats, you know, the German foreign minister was in Israel. I don't think it affects the Israeli thinking. We also understand that this Trump plan was done in coordination with some Arab actors, you know, particularly Saudi Arabia. The assessment is that there may be some diplomatic price to be paid in Jordan, maybe. Egypt is very busy with other things, of course. And I'm ready to elaborate if you want. We are not that worried. Basically, you know, the United Nations, maybe you know the expression shmum, you know, Israelis don't really count, you know, in their calculations, you know, United Nations or many other actors. We know that the Russians and the Chinese will obviously object to it, but they will do nothing about it. And we have a precedent, a recent precedent, when, you know, most of the world objected to the American decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. And there were, you know, so many warnings about what might happen, and disasters all over the world, and nothing happened. So I think Israelis are not really that concerned about the attitudes of the world. And to remind what Ben-Gurion said, it doesn't matter what they're going think or say, it matters what the Jews are doing.
That's good to hear. I mean, there was also a bit of objection to the Golan Heights, but that seemed to fade quickly as well. But let me ask you about two special interest groups. The US Democrats, whether they have any influence in the process. There's been some correspondence and some announcements. And then secondly, the Jewish groups in the US, the left of centre Jewish groups, many of them that have voiced objection as well. Can you make a comment about those two special interest groups?
I think those issues are of importance to Israel. I'm not sure so much to the public, but to the more educated and more politically aware people in Israel. This is, of course, those are important issues. First of all, the Jews. Unfortunately, Jews in America are very liberal and do not always understand, the realities on the ground, and they are a bit naive. So I think that Israel is making efforts to try to communicate to the American Jews. I myself participated in several Zoom briefings to Conference of Presidents and other Jewish important groups, and I communicate, by writing and by making phone calls to many Jewish leaders in order to explain to them the rationale of what we are doing, expecting at least understanding, if not, agreeing with us, and this is also important. About the Democratic Party, this is obviously a source of concern for us because we would love to see bipartisan support for Israel in America. And there are trends in America, which of course we cannot control, it's beyond our ability to influence, that are of concern. The younger people among the Democrats are more pro-Palestinian. There is this progressive groups in the party which are totally anti-Israeli. I would say they are also anti-American, but that's a different issue. And this is a problem. I think Biden, if we are talking about the future, Biden is not part of the anti-Israeli crowd. He's not necessarily a friend of ours. And he already said, by the way, that he will not revoke the decision of Trump to move the embassy to Jerusalem. So if he is faced with a Israeli fait accompli on Judea and Samaria, probably there will be the same attitude on part of his presidency. Now, I must say, again, people warn us about the Biden presidency, but I'm not an expert on American politics, but it seems to me, from what I read, that Biden and Trump have at this time an equal chance of being reelected. So can we say now to an American president, and this particular president is probably one of the most narcissist president we ever had, in the last few decades. I don't think he will take lightly if he offers us a lot of goodies and we say no, because a different president might be reelected. So we should do what's good for us, hoping for the best. And I think democratic presidency, listen, we survived Obama, so...
yeah, that's true, that's true. Well, we
survive another...
You're probably aware that we had a run-in in Australia with the New Israel Fund. And I'm going to ask for your comment on this interaction, that the New Israel Fund in Australia decided in its wisdom that despite saying that it is pro-democratic, to go against the democratic unity government in Israel, it lobbied our foreign minister that Australia should in turn put pressure on the Prime Minister of Israel against extension of sovereignty. Now, we decided, not only just in correspondence to the government, but publicly as well, that needed to be called out and condemned. And we got some media coverage about that. Is NIF in particular getting any traction in Israel on this issue?
No, they are a foundation basically that gives out money. But they are giving money to groups that object to annexation. They also give money to many Arab organizations. It's a pity that we see, in my view, misguided Jews giving money and expressing views which are not in Israel's and in the Jewish people's interest. But, there is a democracy. Everybody can do with his money and his voice whatever he wants.
Of course.
I just can deplore the fact that they are doing what they are doing.
Yeah, well, you can count on us for supporting the Israel position on this and on many other issues as well. We saw in the last 48 hours or so, I think it was a spokesman for the Palestinian Authority make this extraordinary threat that they will declare themselves a state. Now, they've done this, of course, before, but we have a question from the group watching for your comments on the possibility that the PA will declare itself a state.
Well, they can say whatever they want. It's everybody can say he's the state and, nothing will happen to him, basically. There are facts on the ground. They cannot ignore the facts on the ground. And if they call themselves a state, I will be happy with it. So they are, participating in the Trump plan, and it's fine with me. Simply, the military control of the West Bank will not go away. And this is what is most important. They can say whatever they want.
There's also been...
By the way, I think that some states will recognize the state within the 67 borders, the European and Muslim states. And I think we can live with it. Once in Israel, there was a strange guy that decided that the part of the beach north of Akko, Arziv, a place, it's his state. So, so he was on the beach.
Okay. Now, we've had a few Jewish groups, for the opposite reasons, raise concerns as well. Some of the very orthodox, some of the more militant settler groups, if you like, have objected to the Trump plan because it does make, at least in theory, a provision for a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. So these are the people that are basically saying that Eretz Israel should be all the way to the Yarden, and anything less is something they can't contemplate. What do you say to those that want they want the extension of sovereignty, but they want more than is on the table at the moment?
Well, first of all, I think that the Zionist movement has always been very pragmatic. Don't forget that Ben-Gurion accepted a Jewish state without Jerusalem. And now we have Jerusalem, and we have other parts of Eretz Israel. And I think the position of the radical settlers is not practical. I think that saying yes to Trump and to whatever it's written on the plan, and I read all the 180 pages of it, the Palestinian state, according to the Trump plan, has to meet so many conditions.
That's it.
That, I think that, if it will meet all those conditions, we'll be very pleased, with, we should remember it's demilitarized, under Israeli military control, Palestinian airspace is ours. So and they have to be honest and democratic, things which are not in the cards in the next generation at least. So, saying to a hypothetical idea, I think is a good bargain for us if we are allowed by America to establish our sovereignty around Jerusalem and particularly in the Jordan Valley. So I don't think their position is reasonable. And some of them, their leader accused Trump of not being a friend of Israel, which causes damage to us, and it's not true. You can, I'm not a, Trump has many weaknesses, put it mildly. I'm not enamored with him, but he's a friend of Israel, unquestionably.
I'd go a step further. He's the most pro-Israel president that has ever occupied the White House, despite any flaws that you might see in other aspects. What he's done in a few short years is way more than any other president has done.
I fully agree with you.
I've also read the 181-page document, and you're right. The conditions that are in there, it would be. I think one of the great blessings that Israel has is that we've got the most belligerent, unreasonable enemies. If they were people who were compromising and reasonable and pragmatic, it would be much more difficult, I think. But the fact that it's been rejected out of hand, the conditions, most people think that they're not going to fulfill them. They're not even going to try to fulfill them. So the pragmatic approach that you're suggesting is that, okay, Israel's modern history has been stepwise. Ben Gurion in 47, 48 made a step, 67 was another step, maybe we take another step in 2020, and who knows what the future will bring, maybe in another 10 years or 20 years, who knows. So that's, I guess that's the pathway to steer between the pragmatists and the idealists. I want to ask about one condition in that document, if you recall, and tell me if my understanding is correct. Israel will be under an obligation to negotiate the potential emergence of a Palestinian state according to the Trump plan for a period of 4 years. That obligation is not open-ended. Is that correct?
We are obliged, according to the plan, to negotiate for 4 years, or to wait for them for 4 years, and in the meantime to freeze building in areas according to the Trump map that is being designed, is going to be part of a Palestinian state. Those are the conditions. And after 4 years, all our obligations expire.
I think that's a really important point that's not understood by many people. And I've had a discussion with some of our Orthodox rabbis here who take the Torah perspective that, Eretz Yisrael is defined in the Torah and we can't even discuss anything less. And I tell them, well, these are the details and the obligation applies for 4 years. And they said, oh, we didn't know that. That makes all the difference. So I think with a bit of explanation, it'll be really important. Just one final issue to raise with you before we throw it open for questions. There has been a bit of a side debate on applicable international law. Some are arguing that what Israel is doing in Judea and Samaria is in breach of international law. Others are saying that the San Remo agreements and the League of Nations ratification still applies. Do you have a view from an international law perspective as to what that means in interpreting Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria?
I'm not an expert on international law, and I'm not sure it is important. Anybody that tells me that the Temple Mount and the Western Wall is occupied territory, I stop talking to him about legality of my presence there. Come on, that's my homeland, simple. And it's true that, there are Palestinians on my homeland, and the Zionist position has always been, okay, we are trying maybe for a partition, we are willing, if you behave. And the international law, if it's followed as the French and the Germans are thinking it is, it's not acceptable by me. Sorry. Your international law is wrong. I cannot give up my rights to the holiest places, to me, because some kind of judicial concept.
Okay. Now, I'll just foreshadow to the people listening in that we do have a session coming up which will focus on the international law more specifically with Hugh Kitson, Andrew Tucker and Colonel Richard Kemp will be joining us on the 9th of July. So that's an important lead-in. Now, I said final
I just want to add that, people speak about Palestinian lands. Come on, there was never a Palestinian state, how can you speak in those terms? But I don't want to go into that. Anybody that tells me it's not my place, sorry, I'm not discussing it anymore. I'm there, and I'm not going to give it up.
Good on you. Well, I'll throw back to Alan now to manage the questions. I can see in the text there's been quite a lot of activity. And Alan, you're going to...
Okay. Yeah, thanks, David. Now, Edith, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand electronically. The way to do that is just to click on the little icon at the bottom of the screen that says reactions, and there's usually a couple of different images of hands there. Just click one of those. That way we can see you. Edith is the first questioner, and then we've got iPad 2 coming up after that. So Edith, please unmute yourself and then ask your question.
You might have to unmute her. She's unmuted. Good.
Edith, are you there? Let me just find her in this sea of...
No, she's okay, move to iPad 2.
Okay. Manny, I think that will be you. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes. This morning I heard a webinar through the Lowy Institute about the possibility of Biden becoming president simply because the problems that America is having now. Now, it seems that Biden as yet does not have a fixed vice president, nor has the policy been made. It seems that if Biden does take over, he may reverse some of the Trump decisions, especially the ones that are, well, might put the Americans in a more adversarial position with their other allies apart from Israel. How can we be sure that the Trump agreement will be honoured after November? Does Israel have any guarantees that this will take place? And just as an aside, there are a number of Rabbonim who are equally positive that you can give back land if it saves lives. The most significant of which was now the late Rosh Hashiva Ponovich, Rav Shach, who wrote an article for Ohale Torah, which was a B'nai Akiva magazine in the United States. So it was quite significant that he said there are, and he had following, if it's going to save lives, a big if. Okay, so the Biden one and the lack of surety about what rabbis left, right, or center are actually going to be able to say.
We have no guarantee whatsoever what will happen in America or anywhere else. You know, politics can change things. But in the meantime, we establish a fact, and all facts are, temporary. So it depends, borders, if we talk about borders, are influenced by, are determined by two factors. One, power differential. You can have, you can draw a border anywhere you want. If you don't have the military power to defend it, forget about it. So that's one factor. And the other one is demography. In our era where, we're talking about nation states, now a bit less, demography is important. So if we have the power to stay where we are and to keep it, it will be ours, simply. Rabbis, I would suggest to rabbis and lawyers to stay out of politics. If you go to a rabbi, it's problematic. If you go to a lawyer, it's also problematic. So, it's, there are different rabbis with different views, and that's something nice about Judaism, In Judaism, you choose your own rabbi, don't forget it. This is what's written. Aseh lecha rav, you have to choose your own rabbi. So you choose your rabbi according to your views.
Okay, I've got to tell you, Efraim, I think rabbis are all about politics, but that's another story. Now, we have a couple of hands up. Is Edith, I want to see if Edith is still with us. Are you there, Edith? If you are, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Doesn't seem so. Okay, next in line is Miriam. So please, Miriam, unmute yourself and ask your question.
You made a very cryptic comment about that the Egyptians are busy with something else, and you said that you would be prepared to elaborate if we wanted. I wondered if you could elaborate on what they're busy with.
Well, the Egyptians have, of course, great economic problems, and their main problem is to bring food to the table to all the 100 million people. Apart from that, they face a strategic threat from Turkey in Libya. They face a strategic threat from Turkey in the Mediterranean. That's north and west. And they face a strategic threat from Ethiopia that wants to build a dam on the Nile, which is a lifeblood of Egypt. Apart from that, they have also a insurgency in Sinai, Islamist insurgency in Sinai. So their plate is full, and they need Israel. They need Israel in Washington. This is true of Jordan as well. So they may say a few things about annexation plans, but what are they going to do? They'll call back the ambassador. We can live without the Egyptian ambassador for a while. Usually he comes back after half a year, or whatever. Most of the business between us and the Egyptians is not via the ambassadors. So the other channels of communication, which are more important and effective. So the Egyptians are not our problem. This is basically true also of Jordan. Jordan has probably a bigger problem with annexing the Jordan Valley because it has a large Palestinian majority in the kingdom, which is, by the way, diminishing due to the wave of refugees from Iraq and from Syria. So, but the king needs us in the Jordan Valley. Does he want Palestinian entities that may become Hamas, a Hamastan on his border. So he'll make noises, and he needs our water, he needs gas, you know, he's depending upon us. I think we should make certain gestures on the Dead Sea, Red Sea Canal, for example, for the Jordanians one. But we can live with noises, you know. We lived with war, which is more difficult. So noises from the Arabs, we can manage.
Thanks, Efraim. We've got a question from Steve Lieblich in Perth. Hi, Steve. Nice to see you. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Professor Inbar. It's very nice to see you back in Australia, even if only by virtual, by a cyber presence. and shikoyach to the organizers of this event. Professor Inbar, there's a lot of talk about borders and two-state solutions. We've been talking about two-state solutions for nearly 100 years now. And now we're talking about another one with different borders. You know, I just finished a short while ago listening to a Zoom webinar with Professor Mordechai Kedar, who talks about 8 Emirate solution. I find it all a little bit amusing because, you know, all this talk about borders, because it doesn't deal with the real issue. The real problem that we have, why we don't have peace, is because the Arabs reject any Jewish sovereignty anywhere. So my question is, do you think it's possible to change that? Can we actually get to a point, you know, is there something we can do to convince the Arabs to live with us and work with us? Forget about the borders, we'll sort them out, but if they stop demanding Judenfrei territory and they start living and working with us, I'm sure we can find a solution.
Well, I think that basically our relations with the Arab world has greatly improved. Remember what happened in 48, 67, and now we have a peace treaty with Egypt, the most important Arab country. We have a peace treaty with Jordan. We have, you know, some kind of de facto partition by Oslo, which is a messy one with the Palestinians, who have recognized Israel, not the Jewish state, but have recognized Israel to some extent. And we have excellent relations with much of the Gulf states. Just a few days ago, United Arab Emirates airplane landed in Israel, you know, openly bringing materials, you know, humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians. They didn't like it. So, you know, a lot of things are, as we say, under the table in the Middle East. One of my colleagues quipped that under the table it's very crowded in the Middle East. So I think our relations basically with the Arab world are much better, particularly with the Arab elites. This is, of course, not true of the Arab masses, which are still educated and instilled, you know, with anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli feelings. And this is why it takes, you know, a few generations to change this type of attitudes if this trend will continue. A different story is, of course, with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are, again, the leadership. There is a difference between leadership and the masses. The leadership is very hostile to Israel, and I don't think the Palestinian national movement has reached the moment of making a historic compromise with the Zionist movement. So we'll have to fight them and to continue to fight. The conflict is here, and sometimes it becomes violent. And what I suggest to my leadership is not to look for a solution, which is not within reach in the near future, but to manage the conflict in a manner that is less costly to both sides, but Of course, I'm worried primarily about the Israeli side. So generally, I am optimistic about the historic trends, accepting Israel as a fait accompli in the region. Even Turkey under Erdogan has not severed relations with Israel, despite the fact that he is an anti-Semite, he is basically a Turkish version of Muslim Brotherhood, which is totally against the existence of the State of Israel. So on the other side, there are also pragmatic people that want relations with us, not because they like us, but because they need us. For example, Iran is in the background, of course. Americans are going away, so they need us even more. So I think the situation is, we have to take a look at in its totality, not, it's what's happening once in a while when we see bursts of anti-Israeli activity.
Okay. Any other questions?
But some process.
Sorry, Efraim, continue.
No, it's a historic process. It's long, Not in my lifetime, I think we'll see a resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So, and I'm still young.
Look, can I just ask a question at this point? We're running out of time, so if anybody wants to ask a question, now's the time to put up your hand. But Efraim, the relationship or the difference between the Palestinian leadership and the Palestinian people, you started to go down that road. On one hand, we hear that the Palestinian people really don't mind Israel. They quite like Israel. It's the leadership that's the problem. And on the other hand, we see surveys that come out from time to time that say the majority of Palestinian people really want Israel to disappear. What do you think the real story is?
I think the surveys are true, but at the same time, somebody has certain convictions. The question is, what is he going to do about it? People spoke about huge demonstrations in the Arab street, in Palestine in particular, after moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And nothing of that happened. So those people that do not like us, hate us, want us in the sea, still want to come to Israel to work. And they need Israeli medical services. So, and they want, their children to go to school in a quiet environment. So there is a difference between, ideological preferences and what you do with it. And I think that Palestinians in general, it's correct to say, they are tired. And this is the key to acceptance. The Egyptians said it openly. We don't want to fight for the Palestinians anymore. We are tired of conflict. We are tired of wars. And this is why we make peace with Israel. Not because we are convinced by the right of the Jews to Eretz Israel. So this is a process. And, I hope that we'll get less tired over time. So far, I think we are still strong and great social cohesion and ready to go to war if needed, while our enemies display a different trend, and this is why there is acceptance. So
I have a question.
What really counts for us, basically, I'm sure MBS in Saudi Arabia doesn't like Jews. He's a product of the Saudi, education system. He doesn't like Jews, but he needs us. Simple.
Okay. Ted Lapkin?
Yeah, I have a question. You said that you're not in the habit of entering into dialogue with people who negate the right of the Jews to live in their ancestral homeland. So I guess you're not going to be talking to the Israeli Supreme Court anytime soon, because they just came down with a decision that nullified Chok HaAsdara, which is the law that was passed to regularize the status of some of the settlements, the in Yehuda v'Shamron. And this is just the latest in a long history, terrible history, I think, of judicial activism. Aaron Barak saying Akol Shafit. Do you think that there is enough of a critical mass in the Knesset to pass Chok HaHatgabrut, which will allow the Knesset to, in essence, veto judicial decisions, but with a supermajority, and kind of rein in the judicial activism that I think has been out of control in the judiciary?
Just before you answer, Efraim, please just translate a couple of those Hebrew terms for those that don't understand.
Well, first of all, I think, my position is quite clear on judicial activism. And I think that judiciary in Israel, as well in other countries, should restrain itself and respect, other powers, be it the government or the parliament. And I think in Israel, it went too far because of very charismatic and powerful Supreme Justices, such as Aaron and others. However, I really must object, Ted, to what you said about about the Supreme Court. I think they are patriots, and they understand it differently. Their decision was. I do not agree with it, but it was basically an attempt to say that there are, property rights, and under the difficult conditions, they should be respected, and other judicial techniques should be applied rather than the Hasdara law, which actually allowed Israeli government to nationalize land that belonged to Palestinians, private persons, and on this land, part of settlements were built with no prior knowledge of being it private land. So there were settlers that bought a home under the premise that this land is kosher, and the government basically misled them. Or not intentionally, but the result was that it was not according to what the government said. So this is the issue. And I think other ways should be found in order to, and I think this is true of other judicial systems. Again, I'm not a legal expert. In other judicial systems, there are ways to appropriate private land for public use. And so there are certain ways to do it. And I think that it is going to be done somehow. I don't know if there is enough Knesset support in the Knesset for a law that will allow the Knesset to overrule a Supreme Court decision. I think that we have a very independent judicial system, maybe too strong, but it carries certain benefits because, I must say, following politics for so many years, I am a bit suspicious of politicians, and they may, recur to excessive power. So I think there should be some kind of arrangement that limits their power, and this is true of a true democratic system. So of course, we have to find what Maimonides says, the golden path that will delimit, the powers of each of those branches of government. And there is always a struggle, and the struggle in Israel is not a nice one. And I'm afraid that this is not going to have good results. I understand the passions, I understand what's at stake, But I think our language in this respect should be fighting for our position, should be more restrained and respectful of the other peoples that have different views.
Okay, thanks. Now we're actually coming up to the hour, and what we'll do is I'll ask Ted Lapkin to pass a vote of thanks in a moment. We'll formally finish the session on the hour, but hopefully Efraim may be able to stay back a little bit longer. And if anybody wants to just have an informal chat, we can do that for a few minutes. So I'd like to ask our Executive Director, Ted Lapkin, to formally pass a vote of thanks.
Well, thank you very much, and I stand suitably chastised, Efraim. But thank you very much for a very, very insightful session. The depth of your knowledge, your years of experience providing strategic advice at the highest level is obvious, and we have all been the beneficiaries of your wisdom over the past hour, and for that we are profoundly appreciative. And Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim.
Amen.
Thanks, Ted. Now that leads me nicely into next week's event, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different next week. The man you just heard, Ted Lapkin, is actually an author, and he's written a book. It's a fiction. It's well, we'll talk a little bit about that next week. But he's written a book, and we're going to have a virtual book launch with Ted next week, and it's a fascinating book. Ted, just
military thriller.
Okay, just tell people in about 30 seconds what's going on.
Well, it's kind of alternate history, military thriller. It's about a unit of Sayeret Matkal, which is the Israeli equivalent of the SAS, that goes back to October 1940, ambushes Hitler's train, and schwacks the whole lot of them, Hitler, Himmler. So it's basically a decapitation raid against the leadership of the Third Reich. And then something happens, and so you have about 40 of them who are trapped in October 1940 in the middle of occupied France, and they have for 21st century weapons and communications and a UAV, but they have to fight their way out to Eretz Yisrael, which is, of course, at that time is still under British control. But it's it's a military thriller. There's a little kind of a romance subplot as well. So yeah, it's a good read.
It's a great read. I've read it, and it's you read a lot about not being able to put books down, and this was literally like that. It's a fabulous read. So on that note, I want to thank Efraim formally again just for joining us for a very interesting session. Now, does anybody have any particular questions that they would like as people may start to leave? So does anybody?
I've got an additional announcement that should be made.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone here is an AJA member. If you're on our email list to receive notifications of our events and news and views and those sort of things, but if anybody would like to receive those notifications, if you put your name and your email address in the chat now, we will pick it up and we'll add it to the email list. So do that now, and I'm going to share one bit of information. This is a bit unscheduled, but I'm going to put up on the screen something as to why we're creating a bit of a stir. You'll see this is a report of Facebook social media taken off today, and it lists the various Jewish advocacy organisations in Australia. AJA is now #1, not only in the total page likes, the growth rate, but most importantly, the engagements, the number of people who are interacting on social media on Jewish things. You've got AJA #1, Daylight #2. Actually, this total exceeds the combined of all the rest. So there's a reason why that's happening. And if you'd like to be part of that, put your name and email address in the chat, and you'll receive our information and notifications from time to time.
Yeah, that's the good news, isn't it, David? But there was some not so good news today.
There was. One of the downsides of not being cowed by political correctness, of calling things out on matters of principle rather than PC, is that sometimes it attracts complaints from detractors. And we have received some complaints, and our page has been partially suspended for a week. So we've been sort of put in the naughty corner for reasons that are completely unclear. We never advocate violence, we never use inappropriate language, but the social media police are a world unto themselves. So that's another reason why we're very keen to have direct communications and build the email list and rely on that more than be at the mercy of the social media platforms.
Yep. Okay. Now, anybody else got a question? If you have, please unmute yourself and fire away.
Yes, I just wanted to ask Efraim about Hebron. I have read the documents and I have been following the news. Is there any issues about the Jewish parts of Hebron for extension of sovereignty?
I think that the Trump plan makes quite clear that it recognizes the legitimacy of Jewish settlement in the land of Israel, including Hebron. I think the goal of Prime Minister Netanyahu is to have Jewish sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty, over all settlements in Judea and Samaria, including Hebron and Kiryat Arba. So this is the goal. I'm not sure that this will be the first stage. It seems to me that the government is going to annex in stages, as we recommended to them. But Hebron is there.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? There's lots of people here, so somebody must have a question.
I pose a question. You spoke about the divisions among Arab countries. I get the idea, and I could be wrong, that Saudi Arabia, some of the other Gulf states, are a little tired of having to deal with Palestinian problems. Over a long term, do you think annexation might even create even more division among Arab states about it?
I'm not sure that annexation will help us with PR in the Arab world, but we see developments also within the Arab public opinion. We see bloggers in the Arab world that are saying openly, forget about Palestinians. By the way, this is true also in Iran as well. The demonstrators say they no to money to Gaza, give it to us. So generally, I think there is in the region a greater understanding that the Palestinians have been intransigent, and much of their misfortunes are the result of their own doing. So this is true of all over. I don't think that annexing areas will make us more likable, but in international relations, in the Middle East, what counts, what is politically relevant is more fear than love. So I prefer to be feared than to be loved.
I didn't mention likable. I was talking about creating more division over long term among Arab states.
I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Ephraim, firstly, regards from Michael Bird, who wasn't able to be with us tonight. He had his son-in-law's birthday party, but he wants to say hello. This word annexation, Ephraim, I get a bit bothered by it because the word annexation has an implication that there's something illegal or improper or just not nice about it. Other people say, well, we're really extending sovereignty. Do you have any particular problem with the language that's being used?
No, as long as it conveys the truth. I'm against Orwellian language and debasement of language. If it really shows what it really means, that's okay with me. If you object to annexation, I'm ready to say extend the Israeli law, apply sovereignty, as long as it's clear what I mean.
But do you think that the international community picks up a feeling of negativity by us always using the word annexation?
Actually, I am objecting to unilateral annexation because I don't think it's unilateral. Incorporating parts of Judea and Samaria into Israel with the backing of the United States within the framework of American peace plan is not unilateral. It's, we get the support of the greatest power in the world, which carries a lot of diplomatic weights. Therefore, I would suggest to Israel's friends not to use unilateral annexation. If you think that annexation is not pleasant to some ears, you can use sovereignty.
Ephraim, I love that you're so Israeli. You take the view that we'll just do what we want, and the world can think what they like, say what they like, feel what they like. We don't really care. Do you think that perhaps...
I didn't say exactly that,
Not quite, okay.
Condition it upon American support.
But do you think that us here in the diaspora worry too much about the the world opinion and what the media are saying and writing? Because Israelis clearly don't worry so much about it. Are we worrying too much?
Listen, you are in a different position. You are a minority group, bombarded by a leftist press. We are more immune to the leftist press in Israel, and definitely more immune to anti-Israeli attitudes in the world or anti-Semitism. You are much more sensitive to anti-Semitic expressions. We don't care. We know. We were a people that dwells alone, and if we have to do something which is right, and we evaluate that the price is right, then we'll do it. And so it's, I think that, yes, you definitely are more sensitive to public opinion and what the media says than Israelis.
I'd like to ask you about something a little bit different. Israel government in the last couple of days, last week or so, seems to have reversed its position on its attitude to the money trail for paying through the Palestinian banks the pay for slay program in effect. Naftali Bennett had wanted to sanction them in some way, and I understand that's been reversed. And also the offset for those payments in the taxes that are collected by Israel has also been reversed. So what's going on here that Israel seems to have taken its foot off the brakes for the money that goes to the PA terrorists and their families?
Well, first of all, Naftali Bennett was defense minister until very recently, and whatever decisions were made by the defense ministry, he was part of it. Now, I cannot explain. That's true what you said. Of course, that's true. And not only it's true, but it's also against the Israeli law.
Wow.
Because Israel, the Knesset passed a law that makes the government deduce from its payments to the Palestinian authorities the money that is going to terrorists. But I want you to understand that the calculations in Tel Aviv, in the defense ministry, are complex, and they are afraid. I think it's an exaggerated fear, but there is a fear that without that money, the Palestinian Authority might collapse. And then we might find ourselves responsible for dealing with about 2 million Palestinians and to take care of their needs. And of course, we don't want to do that. And this is why this policy has, which is justified, has been discontinued. And we'll see what happens when the pressure on the government will be renewed. Those are also difficult times for the Palestinian Authority, as well for everybody else, because of the coronavirus crisis.
Okay, Manny, I think.
Alan?
Yep.
Alan?
Yes.
Professor, there was a meeting at the Mizrahi of younger people, the younger minion, and one of the people a lawyer raised the issue that until the 1960s, there was no such concept as a Palestinian authority. And once Arafat introduced the concept of a Palestinian group, you created the concept, or the de facto concept, that there might be a legitimation of rights of Palestinians, rather than saying Israelis of Muslim background. Now, once you create a division like that, it's different from saying there are Christian Israelis, Circassian Israelis, Jewish Israelis, and Muslim Israelis. Once you create a separate entity called Palestinians, and that defines a geographic entity, do you create a problem since you and Israeli Knesset authorities talk about Palestinians, and it implies a legitimate separate entity within the geographic borders of Israel, rather than talking about Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. Now, does this new entity in the 60s create a problem?
Of course it does.
Yeah, of course, semantics have political implications. And indeed, the Palestinian national movement was successful in implanting the idea of a Palestinian people in public opinion all over the world. And one of its agents was the Israeli left. That's true. But this is a fact of life now. And I think that we should adapt to it. I must say that identities, are transient. We as the Jewish people have seen many people with different identities come and go. This means that it is possible that one day, those that call themselves Palestinians in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, will adopt a different identity, be Jordan or whatever. I would like to bring to your attention that among the Israeli Arabs, the Arabs that live in Israel, there is also such fluctuation. For a while, the Palestinian component in their identity became stronger. And now, in the recent years, it is the Israeli component in their identity that becomes stronger. You also have multiple identities. You are Jews, you are Australians, you are women and men. So identity has several components, and not every one of it, is of political significance.
Okay, on that note, I think we'll call it quits for today. Thanks again very much, Efraim Inbar, for your time. It's always a pleasure. And thanks to everybody that attended. There's still 50 people here, so you obviously found it interesting, and we'll look forward to catching up with everybody again next week and in future weeks. So from all of us here at the AJA, good night to you all.
Good night all, and thank you very much, Efraim. Well done.
Thank you.